As long-term listeners will probably have figured out by now, October is the month where we pull absolutely zero punches. Much like last week's, this story is strong stuff, folks. So if gore is something that bothers you, please go in forewarned, or skip ahead to next week. PseudoPod episode 565, October 20th, 2017. This week's story, Cuckoo by Angela Slatter. Hey everyone, welcome to PseudoPod, the weekly horror podcast. I'm Alasdair, your host. Your story this week comes to us from Angela Slatter. Cuckoo originally appeared in A Killer Among Demons, edited by Craig Bezant from Dark Prince Press in May of 2013. It was reprinted in the year's Best Dark Fantasy and Horror 2014, edited by Paula Guran, and put out through Prime Books. Angela's debut novel, Vigil, was released by Joe Fletcher Books in 2016, and the sequels, Corpse Light and Restoration, will follow in 2017 and 2018. She's the author of 8 short story collections, including The Girl with No Hands and Other Tales, Sourdough and Other Stories, The Bitterwood Bible and Other Recountings, Winter Children and Other Chilling Tales, and A Feast of Sorrows Stories. Her work has been adapted for the screen and translated into Japanese, Russian, and Bulgarian. Angela has won a richly deserved World Fantasy Award, a British Fantasy Award, again richly deserved, 1 Ditmar Award, and 5 Aurealis Awards, and all of those are a testament to her extraordinary invention and gift with language and character. As you may have noticed, Angela is one of my favourite authors, and I'm really delighted that we've got a story by her this week. We'll have all the places you can contact Angela in the show notes, and in the meantime, let's talk about our reader. Victoria Winnick is a writer, editor, and chef living in Calgary, Alberta. She's been an associate editor with PseudoPod since the aughts, has written educational books for children, and her magazine writing has covered everything from the ins and outs, so to speak, of the adult film industry to jumping fences with punk bands. You can hear her own contributions to the podcast on episodes 467 and 532. And if you're a fan of role-playing games or compassionate anarchy, which is the best kind of anarchy, you can follow her blog at lady/luminoth.tumblr.com. So, get ready to go to work, because we have a story for you, and we promise you, this one's true.
Cuckoo by Angela Slatter. The child was dead by the time I found her, but she suited my purposes perfectly. Tiny, delicate skin suit, meat sack, air thief. The flesh was still warm, which is best. Too hard to shrug on something in full rigor, and I crammed my bulk into the small body, much as one might climb into a box or a trunk to hide. A fold here, a dislocation there, a twinge of discomfort and curses when something tore, stretched just too far. The rent was in the webbing of the right hand. Only a little rip, no matter. The sinister manus was my favored choice of weapon anyway. I sat up, rolled my new shoulders, gently, carefully, then stood, rocking back slightly on legs too tender, too young to support my leviathan weight. I took a step, felt the world tilt, caught my balance before I fell and risked another tear, looked down at the single pink shoe with its bows and glitter detail, took in the strange white cat face that ran around the hem of the pink and white dress, rubbed my miniature fingers against dried brown stains that blotched the insides of my thighs. The child had died hard. The sliver of me that retained empathy ached, just a bit, but I could smell the scent of the one who'd done this, and I would follow that scent. The hunt was on, my blood was up, time was of the essence. My presence will speed decay. I pitched my head up so my nostrils caught the evening breeze and breathed deeply, filling my borrowed lungs so the memory would remain. Again I took a small step. More, all steady, determined, forward. Here's the thing. Evil used to be different. It used to be black and white. It used to be more obvious. Nowadays, everyone on this planet is tainted to some degree. Once upon a time there were villains of memorable, perhaps even admirable scale, but now, without contrast, it's hard to see the differences. I miss that, the delineation of great evil from banal nastiness. I'd walked for 2 hours and the girl's legs were sore. I sighed and stepped into his front garden with its fastidiously dug flower beds planted with purple, red, and saffron blossoms. The house was neat and tidy, a thin building running the length of the block rather than across. I didn't need eyes to tell me that, just the child's memories. I dug around in her fading box of remembrances and found the floor plan of the house, vague as if seen in a rush. A hallway, all the doors to the left, a living room, then 2 more rooms, then a kitchen at the very back where he'd taken her for a glass of water. A staircase near the front door, leading up, 2 bedrooms at the front and a bathroom at the back. The second bedroom she remembered most. The walls had a shimmer to them, and dancing fairies were stenciled around the baseboards and just beneath the architraves. The bed was covered in a Barbie-branded duvet and so many frilly purple cushions that they seemed like an eruption of fabric mumps. Shelves ran across 2 of the walls, burdened with My Little Ponies in every hue and style, too high for a child to reach. And the cupboard, painted pink so it appeared as a mouth in a white face, and inside the cupboard all those shoes, all those single left shoes, tossed in like so much refuse, as if the fetish could never be tidy, as if the inner workings would always be messy. Somewhere in that pile, maybe balancing precariously on the top, maybe toppled down the back, was the shoe that he'd taken as she sat on the bed before he did anything. The mind began to shut down, the memories becoming the blurred white blue of blind eyes. I clenched a hand, heard the joints crack. Time was running short. I didn't need long. A knock on the door, harder than intended, hurt my knuckles. I heard him moving around inside. I coiled, inside the body, bracing myself against the slow wash of congealing blood and decaying organs, against the sea of human soup the child was becoming, and I prepared to spring the moment I saw what I needed. He opened the door. Mr. Timmons gave me nothing. Nothing but a slow, steady blink. His eyes shifted from the dark marks around the delicate throat, down past the bruised thighs, and lit on the bare foot. No fear, no guilt, no remorse. I felt sawn off at the knees, robbed, at a loss. He twitched a sort of smile in my direction and slowly closed the door once more. And I didn't do a thing. I, who once commanded legions, who fell through fire and rose again, who felt the earth shudder beneath my feet, who took into me the souls of the greatest of the worst. I did nothing. The woman was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But then, aren't they all? I'd lain quiet for ages in the alley, just the bare foot sticking out to get attention. About 4 a.m, she staggered along in her high heels, saw the pale flash of flesh, and stumbled over to kneel beside me. The woman leaned in, and I grabbed her. I wrapped my arms around her neck and covered her mouth with one hand, pinching her nostrils shut with the fingers of the other. I held her that way until the life drained out and she released her last breath, emptying herself in a final, humiliating gesture of humanity. It's easier when they're dead. They no longer have the will to fight. If you have to expend energy battling for a body, you're not in the best shape for the contest to come. I stood over her and let the child's form go, unpicked myself from the rapidly putrefying corpse, then watched as it hit the asphalt heavily. It made a wet noise as the side of the face gave way on impact, and the belly burst open like an overripe melon. I stayed outside for a few moments, stretching, feeling the night on what passes from my skin, just for a few moments. Then did my contortionist act and plunged into the woman. Roomier, to be sure, broad across the hips, fleshy thighs, the strange weight of breasts hanging at the chest. I cupped them, jiggled them about, found nothing to justify the fascination with them. Then I felt the fizz and buzz of alcohol in the veins, the unsteadiness of the legs, the jelly of the knees, and that ache in the lower back from being pushed at the wrong angle by the height of the shoes. "I'm sorry," I said to no one in particular. I don't even know if I was. It had been a long time since I'd expressed sentiment to anyone, anything beyond disgust and a sort of righteous boredom. I said it again, just to hear my voice. "I'm sorry. I need—" But I didn't continue, didn't finish, had neither necessity nor desire to offer explanations to the dead. I sat next to him on the park bench. He was feeding the birds, watching all the little girls on the jungle gym, nodding friendly to their mothers and nannies. He didn't notice me, at least not until his nose began to twitch. An unwashed body will garner attention sooner rather than later. His head swiveled and his eyes took me in, not that I would have been of any interest to him. He smiled and pointed towards the children as they played. "Which one's yours?" he asked, although he must have known, couldn't have thought for a moment that my shell, still in its nightclub finery with smudged makeup and bird's nest hair, had care of any child. He grinned slyly, as if we were in cahoots. I turned towards him, shifted my torso, the body beginning to lose its flexibility. My clumsiness made it look as though I was showing him the woman's breasts, presenting them. Disdain, contempt, amusement, all these were in his face. I raised my stolen hand and clicked its fingers. Sparks flew but didn't take. I did it again, and there were flames, at first just at the tips, then they crept to engulf the hand, scorching the arm, catching quickly on the synthetic fabrics of the woman's outfit. It sped across the shoulders, split its forces, and half leapt downwards, while the other continued upwards to set the bleach-blonde coif ablaze. I smiled at him from lips that curled and blackened and shriveled back against teeth furred from no brushing. I watched him long and hard, waiting, poised for that look, that hint, that signal, for the light in his eyes that said he was afraid, because they're all afraid in the end, and that's why I can take them, for the whimpering as he begged for his life. His eyes remained dead, but for a lazy curiosity. He stood and walked away as my body burned to a symphony of children's screams. I followed him all the next day, incorporeal. Vengeance has been my path for so many years, centuries, eons. It's all I've known, or all I remember. I've taken what was just from men great and ordinary, their only commonality being that they had stolen lives that did not belong to them. One life for 1,000 unjustly snuffed out will bring my kind like a hunting hound. I've seen them all learn fear, all tremble when faced with their crimes and beg for forgiveness, more time, another chance. But this man, there was nothing great about this man. There was nothing special but his refusal to fear. I ventured into his house, picked through his things while he went about his daily chores, sat on the sad mountain of shoes in the closet and racked my brain. I heard the phone ring, and he let the answering machine get it. An official voice, tired, disinterested, left him a message, obviously used to no response, but duty-bound to follow through. I listened and then watched intently as he quite deliberately erased the recording, not bothering to take down the number or name the caller had left. I thought I had my answer. The smell of antiseptic was sharp enough to sting, soft-soled shoes squeaking on waxed floors, the clangs of metal trays and bedpans, trolleys banging through swinging doors, alarmed squeals from heart rate monitors as people died, the constant blip of the lesser machines, the swoosh of uniforms as staff hurried by. And finally, a private room. A quiet space, oddly enough in shades of pink, a room meant for 2 patients, but in which only one was in evidence. The bed was a striking piece of machinery, up, down, sideways buttons, the not quite white linen from too many washings, a curtain all around it, ostensibly for privacy, but really so no one is forced to watch someone dying. The woman was younger than she appeared, but still older than I imagined. She looked, no matter her real age, like a crone. She was shriveled, cannulas in both hands tied to a battery of technology. A slit marred her throat with a tube poking through it, and a machine breathed for her. Her hair was wiry iron gray, her face etched with lines, her eyelashes absent. Her mouth, which I imagined to have been often pursed with disapproval in life, hung slack. Saliva gathered in the deep furrows at the corner, some dried and flaking beneath the new layers of damp spittle. I doubted she had much spirit left, no will to fight. I touched fingers to her thin chest and looked for a way in, through the skin, through the very pores, and I felt almost as if I was being pulled down as much as I was entering in. She didn't fight me as her life limped away. Rather, she swam around like the dregs swirled in a coffee cup, and I sensed myself contaminated. But still, I sat the wizened carcass up and carefully turned the machines off before I tore out probes and the sticky pads of plastic that connected us. No use causing a stir, sending a signal. It was going to be hard enough to walk the old bat out of the hospital. I swung my blue-veined legs off the edge of the bed and gauged the distance to the door. 1 chunk at a time would suffice. Bed to door, door to fire stairs to parking lot to the end of the first block to the second block, then his house halfway down that very street, not so far away. The linoleum was cold beneath my feet. The house was dark, but not as dark as inside the woman's head. Insistent thoughts of her son papered the walls of her memory. He was small, so small in there, so tender, so sweet, so vulnerable. Ill. I felt ill. I stood at the door to the main bedroom, watching the moonlight shear through the curtains. I traced its trajectory to the bed. It was empty, the coverlet undisturbed. I backed away. The brittle bones in the feet seemed friable, liable to snap at any moment. The steps down the hallway, the thin, tightly woven carpet, gave no comfort. The door to the princess room was ajar. I pushed it open. It did not creak as I slipped inside. He lay flat, head thrown back, mouth open. Snores issued forth. The mountain of cushions had suffered an avalanche, and I couldn't help but trip against them as I approached. Light streamed in, hitting the sequins and glitter on the scattered squares of overstuffed fabric, throwing beams around the walls. I drew in my own weight until the body was as light as bird's bones, and I crawled onto the bed. My movement caused no ripple. I knelt on his chest and began to gradually let the weight loose. His breathing became irregular. He started to struggle, and soon enough he opened his eyes, blinked to try and make out the face that hovered above his in the moonlit dark. His lids peeled back, widened in astonishment. I leaned forward, hungering for that look, that hint. His right hand wrapped around the old woman's ankle. I glanced down as his fingers caressed the cool, corrugated flesh, tracing the ridges of ancient veins, moving upwards. I fled. I shot out of every aperture I could find and pressed myself against the ceiling as the barely alive body slumped onto Mr. Timmons. His hand did not stop moving. I did not cling there long. I flew through the window and fell, tumbling to the garden beds, pressed the dirt rough against my skin, breathed deeply the fertilizer's acrid perfume. All of this felt clean compared to the contagion that still seemed to coat me. I stood, shaking, and slid into the clean black of night.
The central idea here is one that is so perfect it's impossible for most people to see, let alone build a story around with the level of skill and care that Angela does here. The central idea is this. What frightens monsters? What would that look like? Something that could turn a demon, a vengeful ghost, a creature of the night into the very thing it normally, gleefully, maliciously hunts and kills, into nothing but panic and speed and the desperate need to survive, into a victim, into something weak, into prey. The answer's easy. Us. The answer is always us. The monster here looks like you and me. We pass it on the street every day. Some of us work with it. Some of us live with it. Some of us see it in the mirror every morning. Evil that pays its taxes. Horror that likes its latte with an extra pump of syrup just to be wild. Eric Draven once said, victims, aren't we all? I would argue, with respect to Mr. Draven, that sometimes we're all monsters too. Getting through the day just to get to the next one. Hurting ourselves or others just to stay awake, or perhaps asleep. Trudging up the endless hill of survival and not caring whose rib cages we step on as we get there, or worse still, actively seeking out some people to drop down there because the struggle is just more fun when someone else is bleeding, right? No. There's no sympathy for either monster here, but there is context for the would-be vengeance taker, because what scares them here isn't the realization that their target isn't themselves frightened. It's that their target doesn't care about anything aside from one thing, their own fun. And any path to that fun, however depraved, however savage, however brutal, is a good path. A simple creature made entirely of hatred and impulse. A monster 1 neuron wide. Something whose one thought is simply continue. Do it again, and again, and again. A creature that's as pure in decision process as it is empty everywhere else. Not one of them. Not something we can hide behind the comforting, limiting labels of vampire, werewolf, ghost. One of us. It's always one of us. Chilling work, and expertly done.
The stars have once again aligned, and what an age-old cult had failed to do, a band of innocent authors has accomplished. After vigintillions of years, the flash fiction contest is loose again and ravening with delight. Each week, batches of stories will be released into gladiatorial pits to fight for supremacy. The floor will be churned to mud with the blood of the fallen until the mightiest stories remain for your delight and dread. The Escape Artists Flash Fiction Contest, as led by PseudoPod, is here. Submissions are closed and the carnage begins. Visit forum.escapeartists.net and come participate in voting for stories. They're published on a members-only section of the forum, so you must be a forum member to participate. It's easy to become a member. Drop by forum.escapeartists.net, register, and join us. And may the most horrific win.
We rely on you for pretty much everything. Financially, you can support us 2 different ways. Go to pseudopod.org, click on Feed the Pod, and you're faced with 2 options. Donate can be as much money as you want, more the merrier, as ever, or subscribe starts at as little as $5 a month. Alternatively, if Patreon is more your bag, go to patreon.com/escapeartists, and you can back us there. We've got some really good essays about the convention season various escape artists have had going up there at the moment. That's good stuff. I had fun reading and writing some of that. And we know things are tight at the moment. We know that a lot of you want to help but can't do so financially, and that's fine. If you're not able to, there is something else you can do for us. Signal boost. The simple truth of the matter is this. Escape Artists is a company that is slightly older than the perception of podcasts as a viable medium. And this means we get overlooked quite a lot. And as a result of that, we kind of fall between two stools. So, review us on iTunes, signal boost us through social media, review us on your blog, talk to us on your blog, have us on your podcast and interview us, all of that stuff. We would love to raise our profile a little bit, and if you can help with that, then we would love to help you help do that. Regardless, like I say, we rely on you for financial support and for signal boosting, and you always come through, so please keep doing that, and if there is anything you can do to help, please get in touch. We will be back next week with Flash in the Borderlands XL. We have now done so many of these, I'm no longer entirely sure what the Roman numeral stands for. Let's go with 40. I'm saying this is the 40th. We'll see you then, and we'll leave you with the safe knowledge that this episode and what follows it will be a production of Escape Artists Incorporated and released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license, and that your closing quote, and I'm kind of amazed it's taken us this long to get to him, is from one Friedrich Nietzsche. It is impossible to suffer without making someone pay for it. Every complaint already contains revenge. Cheers, Friedrich. We'll see you next week, folks.